Good morning.
Now, who have you brought for us this morning?
Well, I'm interested in talking about Richard Carey. Quite refreshing in that although he's on the Pioneer Board, he's not a businessman and he's not a big property owner or a squatter. He's a lighthouse keeper.
Oh, well,
so he's the only lighthouse keeper on the Pioneer Board.
Right, okay.
But as you probably know, we've had 29 official lighthouse keepers in Warrnambool. They ceased in 1916 when the Commonwealth government took over all lighthouse keepers and lighthouse keeping affairs. But Richard Carey is our longest serving assistant lighthouse keeper. And of course, that means that he lived in the west wing of the lighthouse keepers' quarters up at Flagstaff Hill.
Right, okay.
So it's nice to know we have some sort of feeling about him.
And it was that lighthouse, the one that is now currently where it is at Flagstaff Hill?
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
Yep.
He was originally, of course, born in Ireland, and with his brothers, the family were in marine affairs. He was a sailor, but he came to Australia on a ship and, of course, lured by the goldfields, hopped off the ship and went to the goldfields, but eventually found his way to Warrnambool and became a boatman, 1858. Now, boatmen were employed by the Customs Department to row the customs officers out to the ships, and they were also used by the harbour masters for anyone official who wanted to board a ship. It was a very tough physical job, particularly in Warrnambool. There's no breakwater to stop the waves, the heavy seas, so you had to be pretty strong.
Would they have been very busy? Would they have?
They were very busy because we're talking about, particularly in the 50s and 60s, this is when the port is very busy, could have had 10, 12 ships in, and that they, of course, have to row them out. The anchors have to be inspected, their crew have to be passed, the doctors have to come aboard.
Okay.
In this case there's disease, and all their goods have to be taken off, and they're taken off through baskets or nets, and so are the passengers, by the way, because they had to be then put onto lighters or flat boats and then rowed to shore.
Right.
There weren't any. The ships couldn't come across to the pier. That was the problem.
Yeah.
But Richard Carey always wanted to be a lighthouse keeper, and he kept trying to move into that area, and he enlisted Captain Helpman's aid at that time to get him a job, Captain Helpman being our harbour master at the time. And eventually in 1869 he became an assistant lighthouse keeper at Wilson's Promontory, and then he came back to Warrnambool. It must have been a relieving position because he came back as a boatman. But eventually in 1874 he was appointed as our assistant lighthouse keeper. And he stayed there until 1887, so 13 years make him the longest serving. He retired in 1894, but he was at Port Fairy, Cape Shank and the Gellibrand lightship. As a boatman, he would have got 7 and 6 a day. That's 75 cents. And an assistant lighthouse keeper was paid the same. So when he retired, he got £118 a year annual pension.
Right.
So it was quite a good job, and it was quite a good position to be in the Ports and Harbour Authority. He was married, of course. He had 9 children. And sadly, 4 of those died, most of them while he was... Well, they were all born in Warrnambool and they all died. The 4 of them died in Warrnambool, and he's buried in our Warrnambool cemetery.
Right.
And he's regarded as a very fine character. He was highly respected in the community, had brothers who were also boatmen, and... he's called one of the good Careys because there was a family living out at Illawarra who were... sort of problems, and I think they were related, but I don't think Richard claimed any close relationship.
Yeah, okay.
So that's Richard Carey,
Right.
and I always admired the lighthouse keepers, and And I always think it's amazing that we've got 2 working lighthouses within 2 blocks of our main street.
Yes, indeed.
And not many people appreciate that.
No. Although at the time he was keeping the lighthouse, so the other one would have been on Middle Island, would it? Or?
No. They're both, by this, in 1874, they're both on Flagstaff Hill.
Right, okay.
And most of that time, it was Robert Deverell was the chief lighthouse keeper, and he lived the other side, and they seem to have got on well. Deverell had a history of not getting on with his previous lighthouse keepers, but no, they worked in tandem to keep those 2 lights going, it was a constant thing because no lighthouse keeper could be on duty more than 4 hours at a time. So that meant that they always had a night shift as well. And, of course, there were so many other jobs to do during the day. So, it was... it must have been paradise for the women, the wives of lighthouse keepers, to be pointed to Warrnambool, with a town so close.
I'm just imagining a family of that size squashed into that little tiny cottage, though.
Yes. Well, one stage I counted that with the 2 families that were there. At one stage, I worked out that there were 25 children in that. Those 2 sides. Wow. But, of course, there were a lot of outhouses that were pulled down when the village started. And, of course, you had, double beds, 4 on a bed and top to toe and so forth. And, of course, also a lot of the children growing up would have been going off finding their own pathways in life. So you don't know exactly how many. Yeah, right. But, she would have had to get on well too, wouldn't she, with the family?
The rest of them, yes, indeed. Not mind their sort of body odours and those sorts of things.
Yes.
There's quite a few Careys in the district still, aren't there? So do they all try to identify with the good side of the Carey family, I wonder?
I haven't really met anybody, and I didn't really ever meet anyone who was related to this Richard Carey.
Right, okay.
His brother was John, and there were several others, but I do know that the ones that were in the Illawarra Crossley area, I do know that they eventually migrated to New Zealand, where the papers were still full of their bad deeds. They were sort of con men, I suppose you'd say.
Right. So all our modern Careys can be trusted. They're all good Careys.
I would hope that they would all come from the Richard Carey. Because it's just nice that he's on the board, isn't it? To recognise our maritime history.
Yeah, indeed, fantastic. Elizabeth, lovely. Thank you again very much.
Good, thank you.